Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Susan Monroe. I'm the office manager with the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and I've got a few opening remarks before I turn things over to our presenter. Upon entry to the call, you have been muted. Your audio will stay off for the duration of the call, just to ensure best quality for everyone. If you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat, and we will address them at the end of the webinar during the Q&A portion. Today, we've got Doug Brocherding, and he's the managing director of Meridian. Meridian is a consulting firm located in Overland Park, specializing in helping clients maximize value from their technology investments. They resell, implement, and support NetSuite portfolios of cloud solutions. As no solution resolves all business needs, they've partnered with other firms to fulfill the needs beyond core ERP, bringing real value and reputable processes to their customers. The value of digital channels, products, and operations is immediately obvious to companies everywhere right now. This pandemic is a wake-up call for organizations that have placed too much focus on daily operational needs at the expense of investing in digital business and long-term resilience. Businesses that can shift technology capacities and investments to digital platforms will mitigate the impact of the outbreak and keep their companies running smoothly for now and over long term. Thank you all for being here today. Doug, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to you. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Okay. Let me move to my screen. Get to presenter view. There we go. Susan, I thank you for that warm introduction. Are you able to see my screen in presenter view?
Yep, I sure am.
Okay, great. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And again, thank you to Susan Monroe and the entire Kansas City Chamber for giving Meridian the opportunity to share some insights on harnessing digital transformation and talking about its support for business agility, business process agility. I've given this presentation a number of times since 2017, and the title has been Harnessing Digital Transformation to Survive and Thrive. And there's a couple of points here where we talk about, let's make some references to Darwinism and evolutionary biology. It's a little, maybe too apropos in the given state of the pandemic, but I think the metaphor still holds as we go through. Again, my name is Doug Brocherding, Managing Director at Meridian. Also on the phone is Eric Levy, our Director of Sales and Solution Architecture here at Meridian, and we're happy to be here and share a little bit about our company and some thoughts on digital transformation. In the nature of being better lucky than good, this morning I woke up and the Kansas City Business Journal had picked up a feed from Oracle NetSuite with a white paper on managing business uncertainty. And we have posted, that white paper on our social media feed at the link here on the screen, and it is very much a to-do list for operating in the pandemic here. A visibility checklist, a process checklist, performance, people, and agility checklist, which is very apropos to the conversation here today. And I told Susan we would make this white paper available to the Chamber so that they could publish it to any of the registrants for the webinar or on their website, as I think it's very apropos. A little bit about Meridian. We have been associated with the NetSuite cloud ERP solution since about 2005. We're a professional services and business consulting firm in the business of helping folks with their business needs assessment, determining the configuration and proper capabilities to help them go through their own digital transformations. We resell NetSuite, we implement the solution, and we do a full suite of business process training and application and technical support services, as well as staff augmentation. Digital transformation is probably an overused buzzword, but I think it's a great phrase for defining what it takes to kind of re-platform an enterprise. And the fact is, I've been doing this for over 25 years, and it has changed a lot in terms of, the process you go through as an organization to do this. And Gartner Group, who's kind of an industry analyst and watchdog, calls cloud, data, social media, and mobility the nexus of forces that really come together to help organizations leverage powerful technology that can be implemented quickly and at a fraction of the cost of previous software. When done properly, small businesses can build customer experience and business process agility that it's very, very difficult for larger companies to replicate. And this construct is really what has manifested itself in what we call the digital disruptors. You can think of the Amazon effect or what Uber's done as good examples of digital disruptors, and we'll talk about those more. But any company can leverage these technologies in a cost-effective manner. And this last phrase, and more importantly, it's not just knowing they can do it, it's having the willingness or the resolve to actually execute on it is critical. And I'd argue that in today's rapidly changing environment, it's absolutely imperative. And in the construct of the pandemic, we're seeing change happen at such a pace that's just leaving some organizations behind if they're not taking advantage of those. Case in point, well, it's not a really humorous situation. It does bring a little levity to the situation. Tom Fishburne has penned some political cartoons, I guess you'd call it, saying, hey, digital transformation is years away. I don't see us needing to do this. And COVID-19 is really the metaphorical wrecking ball that is, driving change in, company by company and industry by industry. But he also says that, hey, digital transformation really isn't just suddenly having everyone working from home on Zoom. It's really asking businesses to rethink how they deliver value to their customers in a digital world. Well, everybody can agree, we need to change in this cartoon on the bottom left. When you get to defining exactly what you mean by digital transformation, people tend to leave the room. It's hard work, and it's a little bit different for everybody else. But what we want to talk about today are, what's happening, what is driving this change, what are the threats associated with doing nothing, kind of what the end state value proposition is and what you can do now. So with that, we'll kind of dive right in. And I think Susan had paraphrased some of this report from Gartner. This was from March 6th, so right at the kind of the initial phases of the pandemic hitting the U.S. Whoops, let me go back. I'll get my highlighter, my trusty highlighter out here. It truly is a wake-up call for organizations, and we're talking about placing too much focus on daily operational needs at the expense of investing in digital business and long-term resiliency. The answer is to shift technology capacity investments to digital platforms, et cetera. But unless you've already done it, that shift is kind of hard to do. But I think we're going to find, and the next slide actually talks about a new normal. And my grandfather always used to tell me the best time to plant a shade tree was 20 years ago or right now. And given that we're going to, be entering a new normal, given that this is a world-changing event and that some of these changes are going to stick with us for a long time, we're arguing that if you're not thinking about digital transformation, the time to do so is now. And McKinsey, we'll see some Gartner reports and some McKinsey reports from about 2017 up to current times that some of them appear very prophetic, that are a couple of years old, and some of them are very current in terms of trying to define what's going on now. But McKinsey, in talking about the next normal or the new normal, saying that institutions that take this opportunity to reinvent themselves have the resolve to do that, can make the most of better insight and foresight. And the key element here is as preferences evolve, because what's happening in the world right now is that some of these buying preferences are changing. The mechanisms and channels through which people are interacting and conducting business are changing. And those that take advantage, defend themselves against the threats, prepare themselves to take advantage of the opportunities, are going to disproportionately succeed. So why is this important? Some of the changes that are manifesting themselves in the marketplace right now, everybody's heard about the Amazon effect, but just in the last month and a half, Amazon's stock performance has outpaced the S&P 500 by over 30 basis points. And even Amazon, I think it was last Friday's Wall Street Journal, while their volume is at record volumes and unprecedented volumes that they didn't even manage or account for, have driven their profitability down, actually, because of the volume and the cost associated with the shipping costs that they're bearing. Staying with the e-commerce initiative or examples, year-over-year change in daily e-commerce spending. If you just look at e-commerce across the board, year-over-year, you're seeing about a 40% uptick. In recent, in the recent month, and certainly full assortment grocery on the order of a 200% increase is just staggering. And we'll talk about the supply chain impacts and business process impacts that are driven off of this type of an example. Highlighting, staying with e-commerce again here, almost 30% increase in consumer sales via an e-commerce channel across all industries, with very obviously medical supplies seeing a spike of up to 500%. Cleaning supplies, obviously, food and beverage. We're reading daily now about the impacts to supply chains in the food and beverage and consumer goods industries, trying to keep pace with this new buying behavior. We actually worked with a local Kansas City company that's involved in the toys and games industry, and they actually, part of their business is the manufacture and distribution of jigsaw puzzles. And they met and exceeded their annual forecast for all sales of puzzles in a 1-month period. So this is a very real dynamic that is happening very, very rapidly. And back to Mr. Fishburne, really requires some seriousness about the digital transformation. But more often than not, the manager of business results that helps get the rubber to hit the road, there's a vacancy here, because this is hard work to define, what you need to do and how to go about it. But and I told you there would be the Darwinism theme here. It's not really the strongest of the species that survive or the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Adaptation is everything. Putting your organization in a position to adapt to threats and take advantage of opportunities is absolutely critical to moving forward in this environment. Our first reference to some of McKinsey's work here, this was a white paper published in 2017 on how to create an agile organization, gives us the framework of a definition for digital transformation as the adoption of a technology platform that is scalable, functionally unified, and delivered with powerful process workflow tools. I think that's the key. These business process workflow tools really drive organizational agility, which is the ability to quickly reconfigure business strategy, structure, processes, people, and technology. And this begins to touch on what the Gartner report that we led off with is asking, is recommending that you do. But, so what is that really? A sister company of Meridian's, Msphere, which is involved in managed services to assist in the optimization of digital asset management and marketing automation capabilities. Chris Kaler, their CEO, came out with a white paper in October of 2019. And while they're helping folks actually go through digital transformation for marketing automation, he continues to say that you need a solution management plan to manage these systems because organizations change, business needs change, processes change, users and digital assets change, and organizations quite often continue to underestimate the volume of these incoming change requests. So the premise or the moral of that story is you can't respond in today's world with yesterday's fragmented business systems. All of the recommendations that we'll see as we get to the tail end of the presentation, are talking about restructuring your business to take advantage of agility. But when your financial system, your CRM system, your e-commerce system, your marketing system, HR, procurement are all separately bolted onto perhaps a core general ledger and interwoven, all of this is organizational friction here in the middle of this slide, and really gets in the way of operational and organizational agility. It's really moving from, it's kind of funny because we see this green screen system that many of you are probably familiar with from 2011, migrating to something modern and new, like this. And this is an example of a NetSuite screenshot. But it's not just about the user interface. This really gets down to business workflow and business process agility being a measure of your organizational self-sufficiency. I can't tell you how many times we enter, a client or a prospect that is considering, making a platform change, and they said there's so many opportunities available for us, but we can't take advantage of them because I'm hamstrung. My vendor or my system, has been modified so much, or I can't get in the queue to get something done for 6 weeks, or in some cases 6 months. The key is being able to rapidly deploy these process changes in response to changing business needs or threats like the virus and the pandemic represent for us today. But these modern platforms allow you to self-direct creation, editing, and management of workflows, actions, rules, approvals, etc. And this is an example of just a simple sales order approval that it's in a codeless, kind of process flow environment. And these changes can be put in place very, very quickly, by business users without the benefit of coders or even the involvement of an IT organization. So why is this important, and what's the meaning behind it? I'm going to get my trusty red pen here. We'll talk about a report that came out from Gartner Group in 2008. And before anybody rolls their eyes, I'll tell you that the first time I came across this report, when it came out, I rolled my eyes too. Said, God, this is so much, just consulting speak, but there's really a lot of benefit and relevance to today's world here. At the base of this, it says generally where we're at today is, right here on this line. And folks are trying desperately to link business processes to automated execution to gain efficiencies and take some of that friction out of the organization. And I think it's really instructive to say that by and large, this line from 2008 is still the line in 2020. Now in 2010, Gartner updated this research, and I think the descriptors they put in each stage of business process maturity you can probably identify with a little bit more. Those that are at the lowest end of the spectrum are stuck in spreadsheet and information anarchy. I think a lot of us can identify with that. We see that in our daily business. Folks just need out of manual processes and spreadsheets. Or the next level up, I'm getting the reports, but they're all one-off requests. A lot of folks and kind of that line where everybody exists, where data is inconsistent and in stovepipe systems. From 2010 forward, probably the mid-2000s, we all heard about data warehousing and business intelligence. Well, the reason it had kind of its golden era was that everybody was dumping all the information from all these multiple systems into a common data warehouse just to figure out what the heck was going on in the business. It was quite common to get to a single version of the truth and figure out what my enterprise, gross margin was. I had to go to my data warehouse, not necessarily my financial system of record. But in today's world, the challenge is that the digital disruptors, those folks that are entering the market with an enterprise performance culture or methodologies and technologies with an aim to disrupt an entire industry segment, are entering at the highest level of the business process maturity curve, and it's transformative, and it creates a massive impact. We'll talk about other examples of who these digital disruptors are, but they present threats. They've seen opportunity in a market and entered, and they present threats to those that are lagging behind or can't take quick action. Back to the original slide, the research basically said that absent a technology platform that allowed your organization to rapidly adapt to these threats from the entrance of a digital disruptor, movement up the maturity curve becomes very impossible. Because what's happening is the scope of that line is literally going vertical. And as you move from immaturity to sophistication, that is cost being incurred to catch up with the leaders in the space. And the phase of maturity is time-based. And so now you've got cost and you're operating in the crucible of time pressure to react before negativity and negative consequences hit your business. And we'll talk about some of those in the industries that are at risk. Staying with the evolutionary biology references here, Tom Siebel, who was the founder of Siebel Systems, one of the first and strongest enterprise CRM landscapes in the late 90s and early 2000s, and now is the CEO of C3 Innovations, which is an IoT, Internet of Things, innovation services and solution provider. Talked about, or made a parallel from technology to the evolutionary biology work of the late Stephen Gould. And Stephen Gould coined the phrase punctuated equilibrium events when he was talking about evolution occurring, or the evolutionary process when something has been stable for a long period of time and is suddenly disrupted by the entrance of a new evolutionary state in in the biological sense. Tom took the historical analog from that to technology and talking about the discovery of fire, the Gutenberg printing press, the automobile, the microprocessor, and more recently, calling the introduction of the internet and the cloud as disruptive extinction events. These are digital disruptive technologies. They create massive opportunities for many folks, but unless you're taking advantage of them, they can also be disruptive. And as evidence of this, he quotes that since the year 2000, over 50% of the Fortune 500 have been acquired, merged, or declared bankruptcy. In their wake, the new species of innovative corporate entities have entered the fray. And we know a lot of these folks. Tesla has come into the market not only, leading the way in terms of the electrification of vehicles, but also the disruption of the traditional dealership model. We were talking before the webinar begun about Uber and Zipcar utterly changing the face of the rental car industry. In this morning's Wall Street Journal, Hertz is actually preparing a bankruptcy filing because of the change in the dynamic in how we ride share or fractionally rent a vehicle. Netflix led the way in terms of just the streaming wars that we're seeing now between Disney, Amazon, Comcast, HBO Max, et cetera. And, the resultant, the consolidation in media and entertainment and, the telecommunication and cable carriers. And the beat goes on. The point is, when digital disruption comes for your industry segment, will you be ready? And that's really the imperative for digital disruption. So continuing on with the threats, in 2017, Gartner had reported that those in the wholesale distribution space with low to average focus on investing in digital commerce were at a 65% greater risk to be out of business within 5 years. Certainly I think we're seeing that pressure on supply chains and disruptions to the global supply chains for some of these players. But those with strong strategy and execution around this could see increases in market shares, in the double-digit growth segments. McKinsey's studies in the similar ilk were very similar, but saying that revenues could be cannibalized or lost. Up to 1/3 of revenues could be cannibalized or lost for those that weren't investing aggressively. Taking it down a notch, in the immortal words of Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights, if you ate first, you're last when it comes to voice search. Because with voice search, there's no top 10 on the Google page. SEO optimization must be optimized to getting you in the top 2 or 3 because Alexa's only going to return so many results for you to choose from. And certainly voice search is becoming absolutely prolific. Some of the new normal is, continues to be the threat and the dynamic change in buying cycle preference changes. I don't think it's any surprise to many of us that when we're doing research or evaluating either a consumer purchase or a business purchase, that we're doing more and more of our research and work online. 90% shift from 2016 to 2019 in doing the research, and 120% shift for evaluation. A little bit more even for a B2B transaction for the ordering and reordering, but it's interesting that McKinsey says suppliers who provide outstanding digital experience are twice as likely to be chosen as a primary supplier than those who don't. The point is that the three things buyers value most, speed, transparency, and expertise, are necessary both for your digital presence as well as your directed or in-person presence, and absolutely critical to any organization's success going forward. And I think this is a new normal that's going to stick with us for the long haul. Okay, so what industries are impacted and at risk? Again, referencing some of the McKinsey research from 2017, and the technologies that are driving changes are in the news frequently. Artificial intelligence and big data kind of go hand in hand. The Internet of Things and machine-to-machine integration kind of walk in lockstep with one another. We talked about autonomous vehicles a bit, and will here when we get to the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll address blockchain and 3D printing there as well. We talked about voice search, but this research from McKinsey, and I apologize, it's kind of an eye chart as it's represented here, but what we're trying to show, or what McKinsey is trying to show, is that in the dark green box is the annual revenue spent on digital initiatives over the past 3 years as a percent of total revenues, and the workforce as a percentage of the total workforce dedicated to digital initiatives. And the gray line coming down the middle of this chart is showing the business revenues from those investments as a percentage of total revenue. If the average investment is here, you can see the industries that are at risk for the entrance of a digital disruptor because of a lack of investment in this space. And that's what these blue bars on the side are trying to show, is the amount or percentage of revenue or market share that could be cannibalized in and across each industry. From the consumer packaged goods space, you see that Amazon buys Whole Foods, and suddenly grocery delivery is a thing. It's not just the .com players trying to get in. It became, a real, business process that very quickly, Kroger and, its peers were chasing. And in the face of the pandemic, it didn't become a thing. It became the only thing. You see the crumbling of the brick and mortar sales model in consumer packaged goods with the collapse of our, traditional drive-up malls, and the trade promotion link between the manufacturer, distribution, retailer, and consumer, in moving more to a, business to consumer model. In the automotive and assembly, or the automotive market, you're seeing the big three really compete for exclusive rights to utilize Google, Apple, Microsoft as the central elements of differentiation and user experience for entire fleets of vehicles. Where to start with the healthcare industry? Consumer self-advocacy and ownership of medical history, absolutely redefining the technology and business processes. I had to send medical records for one of my parents to a doctor, and I literally had to fax it. If that's not an opportunity for digital disruption, I don't know what is. We touched on this, but telecommunications, including You know, the cellular carriers, the cable providers, and media and entertainment, you know, taken together, both are in the top 4 or 5 in terms of at-risk position, and the level of consolidation in terms of managing, you know, cord cutting, and the drive for content being king, and the collaboration here, because the carriers just simply can't differentiate anymore on their traditional business model. Lastly, I'll talk about logistics, and I think this is really ripe for 3D printing and blockchain to collaborate and really bring you know, change to our traditional distribution and logistics model. When, you know, a product spec can be securely transmitted direct to a consumer or an end customer over a secure blockchain, you know, server environment, you know, whole swaths of the logistics and distribution industry are at risk. And I think you see why there's the gap in terms of the revenue potential for the nominal investment, while there's also a high degree of risk in terms of cannibalization of revenue for those that don't, you know, take advantage. I read about a Canadian Boy Scout that made a mask device that kept pressure from the mask band off the ears, and he made the spec for that, for the 3D printable version of it, publicly available. When an 8th grader can do that, I think you see the potential for, you know, wholesale change to an entire segment of the industry leveraging these new technologies. Before we switch to, you know, what can I do, you know, so how many folks are really taking advantage of, you know, this opportunity across the whole risk profile of all of those industries we just looked at? I think it's really compelling to say that over a quarter of all of the respondents to McKinsey's research said that they are planning on fully digitizing their core business and creating entirely new business models. Of those that were going to, you know, digitize fractional elements of their businesses, you know, when you encompass both aspects of that, it's almost 2/3 of all respondents are taking action on this. So if you're not contemplating digital transformation in this vein, the time really is now. Okay, so we shift a little bit here to what can I do? And I found this really compelling, that, you know, the winners in this space that were agile performers, that were represented by the blue bar here, and all other performers in the gray, the biggest delta was in the area of these process chevrons. Really, information transparency in terms of taking friction out of those business processes, and rapid iteration and experimentation, which to me just said adaptation, and continuous learning, you know, kind of an institutional or cultural, you know, predisposition to be adaptable. All 3 of these elements had the greatest delta between the winners and the also-rans, on the order of 40 points, further reinforcing that adaptation and organizational agility were critical. So back in 2017, when this research was published, most of the respondents were saying, you know, of those that were investing, they were investing in marketing and distribution channels, which took the form of an e-commerce platform. But McKinsey's point was that, you know, that's table stakes, and especially now, 3 years hence, I think it really is table stakes. It's harder and harder to differentiate here. And if you're not doing it already, you're well behind. But to me, it was even more interesting that only 2% had reported that digitization and digital transformation was being deployed around their supply chain. Given that it had a potential, as identified here, to deliver over 3% in total earnings growth or 2% revenue growth for an investment in digitization of supply chain. And for a lot of companies, a bump like that is enough to fund a digital transformation process, and is consistent with what we find when we talk to folks about where they their order management, order fulfillment, and supply chain challenges, where they can take friction out of the organization, and often it's here, and that can fund and create fund the fundamental change and create ongoing cost avoidance or business benefit long term. Continuing on that theme, McKinsey showed that the winners and the also-rans here, where supply chain was invested, the winners were seeing almost a 3x increase, and where across the board digital strategy was aligned with corporate strategy, we're seeing almost a twofold benefit. In our business practice, Meridian often coaches folks to find the pinch points in those processes, where there's friction in the organization between those multiple systems of record. These are the points to focus on, and you find those hidden nuggets that can really increase the top line or help take cost out of the organization and improve the bottom line. And I'll close here with, this is some of the suggestions from that Gartner article that we quoted at the beginning that had the robot. They were saying, we need to inventory our work use cases, find the typical workflow of people, and when they work remotely, help them understand how to change those business processes to do their job, more efficiently. Embrace the opportunities, as far as technology was concerned, their suggestion was to embrace opportunities to adapt products or capacity for current demand and expand your agile business processes to enable fast shifts. Again, if you don't have the platform to do this, you got to get busy planting that shade tree we were talking about and do it now. Especially in times of uncertainty, it's difficult to embrace change, but I think to keep pace with the new normal, this is what's required, and what all of these analysts in the research that we've quoted here today are suggesting and recommending. It really comes back to, this is why Meridian works with the NetSuite platform. This shift in technology from siloed business systems to a landscape like NetSuite that's based on a single data source, and all of its components are written in a common code base. And the advantage is that it takes data out of these fragmented silos. It gets rid of multiple user interfaces, because whether you like the user interface or not, a common user interface, represents a smaller training hill to climb instead of understanding how to interact with multiple of these systems. And I think the biggest piece is it takes away these broken transactions and order flow and takes out these points of friction like these red lines here, and gives you a single version of the truth. Another way to look at it is, regardless of where you sit in the organization, you can have a view of the customer, my item inventory, and what's going on with work order, project, or order volume as it moves through the organization, whether I'm in sales, accounting, or on perhaps a shop floor, fulfilling an order, or in the field executing upon work that's been given me. Splunk is a longtime NetSuite client, and quotes is quoted as saying they can now spend their time drilling down and analyzing data rather than copying, combining data from different sources and systems. You know, they're spending time not getting the data into the system, but trying to figure out what it's telling them. Similarly, Glassdoor has improved their transaction volume 5x without adding headcount or staff, and improved the close cycle from 20 days to five days. Research links are here. And with that, I'll conclude the comments for today. And Susan, I'll open it up to questions or comments. If we've captured your attention or you know, created you know, some questions in your mind, we're happy to try to answer them here. Or you can drop us a line at you know, via a lead form on our website, or send our sales email address a linkage, and Eric and I'd be happy to get back to you as quickly as we can. With that, Susan, I'll close my comments and see if there's any questions on the line.
Thank you, Doug. You're very well spoken. That was a wonderful and very valuable presentation you just gave us. I would like to remind everyone that this has been recorded, and we'll have it posted to our YouTube channel. So if anybody missed any part of the call, they can go back and review it. And at this moment, it doesn't look like we have any questions that have been posted to our chat, but if anyone does have any questions, I encourage them to post it there now. And we'll give it just a few minutes to see if anybody has any. Thank you, Doug.
Okay, our pleasure. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to seeing how this plays out and what the predictions that these analyst groups have put out there hold for us in the near term.
And Eric, thank you.
Hey, Doug, this is Eric. Thank you all. This is Eric here. I did have one other comment that I'll make that I think kind of wraps up everything that we talked about today, and I think an interesting point. And it struck me as we were looking through some of the slides that we talk about business disruptors, and we talked about the slide that had Square and Uber and some of the business disruptors. And what's really interesting is that many of those were actually born during the 08-09 recession. So you look at companies like Venmo, Uber, Pinterest, Slack, Instagram, Square, Cloudera, you know, billions and billions of dollars in current valuations that were born out of you know, disruptions from the last recession. So I think it's important to point out as we look towards the future. You know, who knows what the future will hold from what we are going through now, but I think that there is, you know, the possibility for certainly, you know, exciting growth to come out of that.
Yeah, that's very true, Eric. I don't know that had exactly struck me, but you're very right.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions listed here. However, as Doug and Eric mentioned, they are able to be reached through their website as well as this email listed on the screen now. So if nobody has any questions, I guess we'll wrap things up and end the webinar.
Okay, thank you again. And Susan, we'll make that Managing Business Uncertainty white paper available to you this afternoon. It's also out there on our LinkedIn feed for Meridian. If you want to go download it now, certainly make that available to the Kansas City Chamber membership. So again, very much appreciate the opportunity, and have a great afternoon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Oh, yeah, looks like we got a question.
I think there's a question.
Or maybe that's, it looks like Eric typed that in there.
Oh.
Looks like from Chase, she says, thank you for all the wisdom. We are currently going through a painful process with different ERP product. Do you have any recommendations for small business ERP products? NetSuite is a bit pricey on our side. Thank you.
Love to talk to you about that more. I don't know what you're running today. I will say that we are, as I mentioned, Meridian is exclusively focused on NetSuite. I don't know how much evaluation you've done with it, but we've taken any number of clients from zero revenue or at startup stage, or those that were running a QuickBooks or Peachtree type solution for core core financials. And rather than making a recommendation that they bolt on an inventory management system or a bolt-on CRM to those, have created kind of a phased approach around NetSuite to make it very much more affordable and kind of start the journey with core financials or financials and CRM, and then as they grow, be able to take more and more advantage of some of the modules within NetSuite. It's much more affordable than the 10 years ago, the on-prem kind of buy it all now to get your best deal kind of scenario, and the cloud-based subscription model I think has made it much more affordable. I'd love to dig in more to your question if you're open to that, and see if we can help maybe find a way to make NetSuite a bit more affordable. But my recommendation would be, go down a more of a suite path if you can, rather than starting down a kind of a best of breed siloed solution where you end up with in that situation where you're bolting all of this stuff together and creating organizational friction. That's not the objective. I know that may not be the answer you want to hear, but I think that's probably the best practice.
Looks like Shay says thank you, and she looks forward to speaking with you.
Okay, great. Love to.
Wonderful. All right, if anyone has any other questions, please type them in the chat now, and we'll be sure to answer them.
Any others?
None that I see.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
thank you very much.
Sydney and Susan, thank you very much, and we look forward to participating again in the future, certainly on other webinars that the Chamber provides, and hopefully be invited to present again.
Absolutely. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Okay, take care. Thank you.